All right. Appreciate it, Coach. Thank you guys for having me. Thank you to the Texas Hispanic Coach Association for being on here. I know I was able to also present the first ever in-person clinic that they had back in Leander. So thank you all the guys that are part of the association, and honestly a brotherhood that always welcome people regardless if they're Hispanic or not, just to rub elbows and honestly be part of one of the best, or if not the best profession in all of careers. Honestly, coaching, man, it's such a powerful tool. But my topic was just about, I just became the head football coach and athletic coordinator at Wesco East. And I graduated from here. I'm from Weslaco. So I'm an alumni, so it definitely has a special place in my heart. But obviously, when applying for a position such as this, the best way I always describe it to people is when you're a football coordinator, it's 90% football, 10% administration, and then when you become the athletic coordinator, it's flipped. You go from 10% football to 90% administration. You're not just dealing with football. You're not just dealing with football. You're dealing with all sports. You're dealing with a lot of different things. Every day's an adventure, and there's never really downtime. Just when you think your calendar's clear, something pops up. Whether it be a parent, whether it be one of your student athletes doing something, getting in trouble, or you just got to meet with something or somebody, or there's always something going on. The best way to describe it is imagine yourself as a pinball in a pinball machine. So I'm going to go through this. This is the exact portfolio or presentation that I use when I interviewed for this position. Obviously they did give me like I guess an agenda or a rundown of items to cover, and I was able to kind of hit most of them. But these are all things that we're currently going through right now, and the changes that we're trying to make. Not everything is in place yet, but obviously I think when you're first applying for a position, number one, do your research. Don't just apply to jobs just to apply. Do your research, understand the school, understand the tradition, the logo, understand the coaches. What sports are they really good at? What sports are they struggled in? All those things are important to know when you go into any type of head coaching interview. Understand who the AD is, their philosophy, things like that, are very, very important. Are you getting a program that you're trying to rebuild from the bottom, or are you getting a program that already has tradition and you're trying to build off of it? So just things to consider, but I'll kind of run you guys through it. I know I have my 30, 60, 90-day plan in this as well. It's kind of long. I think it's about 60 slides. So again, I'll just touch up on the basis of things and then kind of just take it from there. All right. So to kind of run through it, obviously, I think the number one thing going into this interview is I wanted to be able to relate to the committee, to the teachers, to the administration, to the community. So I just wanted to make sure that I could point out there that, hey, our principal uses a slogan called "Be the Wildcat," and I am the Wildcat, right? Literally. So, I graduated from East. Like I said, I was an all-state offensive lineman. I was a state champion in powerlifting. Went on to, play at Texas A&M Kings. So that's one thing I wanted to emphasize. This is just my professional, obviously, summary background. These are things that I include basically your resume. I'm not going to hit up too much off of it. I am a certified strength conditioning specialist. I did an internship at the University of Texas for strength conditioning. Got my bachelor's and master's from Texas A&M Kingsville and Sul Ross. Okay, these are just clinics that I've spoken at. One special thing that we did at San Benito when I was there was we were able to start the Valley's first inside whole clinic. So this was strictly O-line and D-line specific. And obviously it wasn't just me. It was a lot of kudos goes to my mentor, Dan Gomez. He was the mastermind behind this, and I just kind of, I guess, was the face of it. But he was the one behind the scenes, kind of making this happen, and we were able to build off of it every single year. So it was we were just able to jumpstart it. And then I've also spoken at the national level for the National Strength Conditioning Association as far as the high school level. And then again, one thing you got to make sure is when you're interviewing for something, this is the exact mission statement from Wesco East. So like when you're applying somewhere, your vision, your philosophy, even if you got to steal the school's mission statement, like use it. So that way they understand that, hey, this guy did his research and he's in the same vision, or he's going to promote the same things that our campus currently is promoting. This is the exact, again, the same mission statement from our athletic department. This is from our athletic handbook again. And these were just things, references that I used back that our AD used, right? So making sure your vision is aligned, you're vertically aligned with your athletic director, your principal, and your superintendent. Okay. So, and understanding, you got to be able to make sure. I'm trying to see if I can minimize this. I don't know if I can, but you want to make sure when you're first starting an athletic program, remember, it's not just football. It's all of athletics, right? So to me, being able to holistically develop the student athlete. So I'm just not worried about how strong, how fast, how many home runs. I'm worried about every aspect of the student athlete, social, emotional, mentally, academically, community relations, how do they act, in the community. Those are all things that we want to be able to mold our student athletes to be, right? And how do we do this? I'm really big on building intentional relationships, right? Building building something as far as understanding that education is a people first business. Understand the person first and the athlete second, right? Same thing when it comes to building a staff with your coaches. Understand the person first, who you're hiring, the coach second, right? You want to be able to make sure that even when amongst your staff, that you can have conversations with your coaches besides the game of football or besides sports. And then obviously just using sports as a tool, right? So as we understand that as football coaches or whatever sport that we teach and coach, we need to understand that it goes deeper, way past just the sport itself. You're using these things to be able to mold, student athlete, and then making sure that our athletes are valued, known, developed, and loved. Those are my four core principles or values when it comes to our athletic program. And then again, like this last one, this goes along with our school district, just making sure that our kids are CCMR, which is college career military ready. So again, our core values, it's an acronym, and obviously I used EAST, right? So just energy, accountability, strength, together. And these are just small things again that you want to be able to highlight and make sure that the committee understands, what you're about and what you're going to emphasize across the board. Again, going back to every athlete matters, right? So I'm really big on making sure that every single athlete in our program is accounted for, from the third string JV light kid to your starter Division I player on varsity football, right? So understanding that I want to be able to make sure that when the time they enter our program from the elementary feeder, I'm very involved with our PE curriculum as well. So I get very involved in what they're teaching the kids there to the middle school and then obviously to the high school, right? All of that connects. So just making sure, because the fastest way a kid's going to buy into your program, in my opinion, is when they see that they're getting better. If they're getting better, they're getting stronger, they're getting faster, more than likely that kid's going to stick around because whatever it is that you're doing, it's working. So that's one way, to keep a kid engaged, right? But again, making sure kids are valued, known, developed, and loved. And then making sure, what are your parent expectations? Make sure you make that very clear whenever you're committing or whenever you're presenting to a committee. I did not read all these bullet points. I maybe read two of these just the way I'm kind of like going through it with you guys. But I'm really big on what's called the athletic triangle, right? So understanding like, hey, it takes three of us. It takes the coach, the parent, and the player to be able to understand, that we all got to be in the same page, all at the same time. And then understanding your 95-5 rule. So 95% of your parents are going to be on the same page of what you're doing, but you're always going to have that 5% that kind of may cause you, some issues, some headaches. So just finding ways to make sure that whatever it is that you're doing, you document it. You have your parent meetings. Always keep an open line of communication. Understand that the parent knows what their role is, right? And then the biggest thing is making sure you cover parent meetings, right? Understanding what a parent's going to get out of a parent meeting. So my main three key rules that we do here at West Coast is making sure, number one, we never talk about playing time. Number two, we never talk about another athlete. And then number three, we never talk about scheme. So just understanding those three things, whenever you're explaining this to a committee, and then, just understand, a lot of people typically, like one of the questions on the thing that, when we got this email, right, and it told you, hey, you're making a presentation, they want to know what's your philosophy over discipline, right? And I think discipline simply is doing what needs to be done when it's supposed to be done, how it's supposed to be done, right? And just being consistent about it and just making sure that you're setting clear expectations, being firm, fair, and consistent. Again, going back to being able to build an athletic program, right? So understanding, okay, how are you like, not just going to focus on football. It's not football anymore. You're not a coordinator anymore. You're now a head coach, an athletic coordinator, an athletic director. So understanding what are you going to do to unify an athletic program. I think it's very important that you include that in your slide, right? So again, going back to research, research is very important. So if you look at this spreadsheet right here, I make sure to go back and look at, okay, like for example, you're looking down the sports on the left, whatever is in yellow, they've made the playoffs, or have had a postseason winner or district title in the last 4 years. If they're in red, the program has never captured a district title before. So when I made my presentation, I did this research. I made sure I said, hey, well, these are the programs that are struggling, and this is what I'm going to do X, Y, Z to help these coaches. Maybe it's resources. Maybe it's, they lack numbers. Maybe they don't have a vertical alignment plan at the middle school. Whatever it was, I'm going to make sure that when I meet with the coach, I understand, hey, they're in the red. I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure they have support, right? That's what your job is as an athletic director, an athletic coordinator. Give support to all your programs. Be fair and consistent. I'm not going to cover that. I don't got to cover this stuff. So again, I think a big one is community relations, right? So talk about how you're going to get involved with the community. Making sure that you're very visible, you're approachable, and that you understand that it's not just again about football. You're going to go out in the community. You're going to help shape the entire community that you're helping out, not just you're worried about West Coast and that's it. You're also worried about just the overall kids of Westlaco. Very, very big, very important. This is kind of just, how I would run a youth camp and then having our clinics also as soon as we're done with our youth camp. And then understanding, hey, it's not just you that's just an athletic coordinator, your coaches understand that it takes everybody, right? So being able to highlight our teachers and support staff, band and fine arts, administration and counselors. Have a social media plan. I think that's the biggest one. Nowadays, obviously, we know, right? Obviously, we're on this because of Zoom and we communicate through social media. Have a social media plan on what you're going to do to highlight your programs and all your sports. And then also have program goals, and make them realistic. I think the most important thing when it comes to goals is just being able to make sure that you can track them, right? That you can track them, that you can somehow measure them, right? And just make sure that they're realistic. But have overall athletic program goals. Again, this just kind of relates back to how I go about hiring a staff, right? And that's currently the process that I'm in right now. And honestly, that is probably the hardest thing to do as a head football coach is bring in people that are like-minded like you. And not only that, but then you got to deal with, okay, do we have the slot? Like right now we're in a giant, deficit as far as our budget. So right now things are a little bit tight. So they're not allowing me to kind of bring in people right away, but they're slowly allowing me to. And so, again, those are things you got to be able to adapt and still figure out ways how you're going to overcome that and not just, compensate it. So four things that I look at whenever I'm hiring a staff or hiring people on my staff, I look at four things. Number one is their character. What kind of person am I hiring? Number two, how do they communicate? Number three, what's their competency? So the position so if I'm looking for a defense coordinator, I want to see exactly what he knows. And then lastly, his chemistry. I want to know, okay, how does he get along? How would he fit within our staff? These are just UIO rules that you'd cover with your staff. I'm not going to go over that. Fundraising and budgeting, a very big one. Understanding, where your district's at as far as this, how much funding that they give you. Try to find out these questions prior so that way you have a plan. And then set expectations for yourself, right? So being able to understand, okay, what are standards of the athletic coordinator, the head football coach, and ultimately, I love these two pictures right here. So right, so a boss on top, a boss is going to tell you what to do. They're going to tell you, hey, go do this, go do that, go get this, go get that, right? But a leader is going to show you, right? And that's what I'm all about. I'm making sure that I could lead by example and making sure that if a coach needs help, if a coach needs something as far as being able to see a product, I want to be able to go out there and show them exactly what I'm looking for, right? And then having a fireman approach, that's the biggest thing as an athletic coordinator. You cannot let things kind of just build up, or you can't like delay things. That's the most critical thing. You got to be able to take things head on, right? So whenever there's a fire, right, and we call 911 or whatever, the fire truck gets there, fireman gets off. He doesn't look at the building and he's not like, you know what? That's a big fire. I don't feel like going in today. No, he has to say, hey, screw it. I got to get in right now. I got to take this thing head on. And that's the way you got to attack these problems. Because if you let something, minimal kind of build up, then, that it's only going to get worse. Have standards for your head coaches, right? For your head sport coaches. Have standards for your assistant coaches, your middle school coaches. Focal points of emphasis. So kind of going into my first 90 days, right? These were three things that I wanted to overemphasize, which I believe that I have so far, which is my vertical alignment with my middle school feeders, my female sports. That's kind of one thing we've lacked is just our overall participation numbers in our female sports. And then we have our facilities. As far as our vertical alignment, what we're kind of doing right now is in Weslaco, we don't have an athletic period for our middle schools. So what I do to make up for that is I send my coordinators right now down to the middle schools, and we use that 1 hour strength condition that the UIL grants us with the middle schools. So our coordinators go down there, they take them through a warm up, they sprint them, change direction work, and then take them in the weight room and get them a workout within an hour. So to me, that's better than nothing at all. So we've been doing that, and then other things, just being able to provide resources for our middle school programs, female sports. Being able to collaborate with our with our female sports, seeing what it is that they need, making sure that they have access to all your facilities. I've been places where, football is the only team that goes in the weight room. And to me, that's not a healthy or competitive program. You want to make sure your female sports are in there just as much as your male sports. So making sure that there's, that they have the luxury of being able to go in there and use it just as much as football, so being on the same page with that. Another thing that we're gonna do is a middle school try it out day. So all incoming seventh graders, we're gonna go down to the middle schools. We're gonna have like basically a giant county fair. So we're gonna have basketball, volleyball, all these different sports, and each kid is gonna basically we're gonna split them up in stations. Each kid's gonna try every single sport. If they like the sport, hey, they're gonna be wearing basically like a dog tag, and it'll have a number on it. And if the kid is like, "Hey, coach, like I really like this, whatever," the coach is gonna write down the number, and the middle school coordinator has a contact list, and right next to the, like, for example, if it's Carlos Cuellar and I was number four, it's gonna say number four Carlos Cuellar, and then it's gonna say all my information, my phone number, my parents' name, my parents, where I live, everything. So that way that parent could already start making contact with those kids to come and try out basically a new sport, even if they haven't played, right? That's why we're here as coaches, to develop athletes. So right here, so this is ultimately the meat and potatoes, right? Of things that I've discussed. So what am I doing the first 30, 60, 90 days? So I split this up in three things. What my athletes are going to be doing as far as football, what my coaches are doing as far as my assistant coaches, and then what I'm doing ultimately, right? So within the first 30 days, I wanted to set the standard with my athletes, give a presentation, our beliefs, core values, vision, really hammer athletic period procedures, constant reinforcements of athletic period standards. Athletes form relationships with coaches. Each player will have a sit down meeting with the head coach, and then just going over our strength conditioning, general physical preparation, phase number one. So to me, the number one thing was getting in and getting these kids on a routine and setting the standard early on. So that way they understand the expectations, and you're not going back and kids, kids are smart, right? And they're like, coach, you let me show up late every single day and you never told me anything, but now I show up late and now you're trying to make me do, XYZ. And and ultimately that doesn't look very good. You should set the standard early on. And the hardest thing that I always tell the kids, and I ultimately believe this as a coach, the hardest thing is being consistent, man, because we all get fired up to come out in August and the pads come on and hey, we're all gun ho, coaching at a high level. But how do we coach when it's week 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12? Are we still coaching at that same level? Or are we already kind of looking forward to Thanksgiving, right? We got to make sure that we're consistent every single day with our expectations. As far as our coaches, I was meeting daily with our staffs, going over expectations, even with the coaches. The coaches need to understand what your expectation is, right? If you just go out there and you never tell our coaches or your athletes anything, right? Now there's miscommunication and you're all pissed off all the time, but you've never sat down and gave them an outline. Coach, I need you here at this time. I need you doing this. You're responsible for XYZ. When the kids come in at this time, you have supervision. You get ready for class at this time, or whatever the case may be, right? So you got to be able to give the coaches, their expectations as well. As far as myself and being an athletic coordinator, I was setting team meetings up. I was emphasizing athlete participation and recruiting on campus. So when I first got the job here in West East, we had about 62 kids in our roster. So that's not very good for a 5A program, in my opinion. So 62, and then maybe about 30 kids were showing up to athletics. Right now, we're sitting at about 111, 112 kids, and we average about 90 to 100 kids daily. So right now, like I said, we just got off the field. I just got done with spring ball, and right now we had about 95 kids present. So anything above 90 to me is good, but we still want to constantly aim for being having perfect attendance, right? Because if the kid's not here, they cannot get better. And then again, just being consistent, being present as far as in our administration meetings. So one big thing that you need to understand, I think, if you're an athletic coordinator, head football coach, when your principal has administration meetings, like ours, for example, or every Monday at 9:30, which is after athletics, I always go to them, always, because that allows you, one, not only does it just, you're showing face and you're showing that you care, but also you get to see the things that they're struggling with, right? Remember, you're an athletic coordinator, you're here to help the entire campus. You're not just here to help football and just sports, right? So understanding, right? And then obviously we always have that stigma that coaches don't do anything, right? Teachers think coaches don't do anything, and then coaches think teachers don't do anything, right? And so we got to be able to close that stigma and get rid of it. And how can we do that is by the athletic coordinator and the head football coach being present at these meetings, understanding what's going on throughout our campus, what's giving us trouble, being involved with registration, being involved with what's going on with TIA, involved with, hey, how can we get our rating higher? What can we do? How can we track our CCMR kids? Those are all things to help just elevate your athletic program across the board and even from an academic standpoint. As far as 60 days, again, athletes, going back to athletes, they're getting familiar with the athletic procedures. Now we start meeting with the coaches. We started doing meetings, being able to install our offense, defense, and special team schemes. Athletes begin doing football twice a week during the athletic period, and then we start filling out our goal sheets, right? So I'm really big on setting goals. Like I ultimately think, like, whether you write them down, you type them, you put them in your phone, you need to have goals, long term and short term, because if you don't have goals, you're just shooting in the dark. Ultimately, you got to have goals, and so I make sure that our athletes do their goal sheets, and then we begin our second block, which is general strength phase number two. As far as coaches, our coordinators start meeting. We're going over practice scripts and installs for spring ball. Position coaches meet with coordinators to review installs. Position coaches begin building a drill menu. Coaches begin meeting with athletes to review scheme. Coordinators begin visiting middle school athletic periods daily. Coaches begin a draft for competition games. As far as myself, I begin forming a leadership council, evaluate needs for all sport programs, technology, ordering for the 2026 season, evaluate the weight room, strength, weaknesses of overall all programs, fundraising, set up dates for our 2026 athletic program physicals, and then educate our athletes on recruiting, NCAA clearinghouse, 4x4 eligibility. One thing I want to highlight too is the first 30 days, I was able to meet with all our coaches, have a one-on-one sit down, get to know them. Something very informal. You don't got to document any of that stuff like that. But just as long as you meet and you kind of touch base with everybody, so you kind of see where everyone's mind's at, their mindset, their vision, things they've lacked. You just get familiar with all your coaches. Lastly, this is probably where I'm at right now. We came back from spring break, so athletes begin what I call Wildcat games, and that's just kind of to reward our athletes for working hard from the. Oh man, my bad. It's because I'm not moving. Okay. So that's just kind of to reward our athletes, from all the hard work that they've been doing. And then we begin our max strength phrase right before spring ball. Athletes begin understanding base concepts of new install. We're doing football 3 times a week. We're doing 7-on-7 pickup games, lineman challenges. We begin fundraising. As far as with the coaches, we're meeting weekly, covering the class roster, depth charts at all levels, coordinators and position meetings, meeting daily as well to cover scripts for spring ball. Position coaches mastering the basic installs. Coordinators will have the first 5-day install and practice scripts ready for spring ball. Coaches begin off-season scouting report. As far as myself, we're already setting dates for spring ball, which is we had them before spring break, but setting dates for our football youth camps, for our 7-on-7 elementary tournaments, setting up dates again for our physicals, strength conditioning, football schedule for the next 2 years, and then begin our first fundraiser. So that's kind of 30, 60, 90, and then I'll kind of run you again. These are just, again, looking at the numbers which each program had. Again, do your research. Try to find a way where you could find numbers where every program has. So if you're looking here at the bottom to the left, we had 600 kids total in our programs. So check this out. So again, in football, my bad, we had 63. So if you look at the last game versus Harlingen South, which is 11-7-25, varsity, we had 41, JV 15, ninth grade 26, totals 82. But again, 19 were seniors. So we had 63 kids in our athletic period class. Right now, we're up to 110. And these are just returners offensively and defensively at the bottom. They're going to want to know how did I increase my athlete participation? The first thing I did when I brought the coaches in, I gave them what's called an accountability list. Each coach is responsible for a set of kids. They call those kids every single day. If they miss, they call them. And we track these kids down, make them show up. We emphasize attendance. I went to the counselors. I told the counselor, hey, give me a list of every single kid that quit football the first semester. We were able to convince all those kids to come back. And then the last thing is I went to the PE classes, straight up walked into a PE class. I said, how many of y'all want to play football? Had like 10 kids raise their hand. All right, come on. Boom. Make sure they had physicals, brought them in, and that definitely helped build our numbers up. Again, how do we keep it? We must have coaches that are people of character. We got to be family driven, and we got to make sure that we have tradition. Okay. We're really big on character development, forming a leadership council. We follow 2 words, which I know Coach Bettis is on here, and he's probably throwing up as soon as I say 2 words. He's 360 athletics, right? We follow the Texas way, and like I said, we form a leadership council. Again, I think this is one thing that I definitely use to my advantage is understanding. Again, you got to understand the academic side. Don't just be a meathead and don't understand what's going on as far as the academics works, right? So, like for example, I wanted to make sure that I understood exactly where our school was rating and how I could help improve it, right? So understanding, hey, the fastest way for a school to go from a C to a B as far as a TA rating or from a B to an A is making sure your kids are CCMR. So that's simply making sure that your kids are taking a TSI test, making sure that they're completed their end of course exams, making sure they're taking an AP test, they've taken their ACT, SAT test, their ASVAB, whatever. If your kid has done one of those things, and let's say you have, again, I'm responsible for 600 kids out of 2,000 kids. That's about 30% of the school population. If I can make sure that 30% of those are all 90% of that 30% is covered CCMR wise, I guarantee you that makes my principal happy, right? So I want to be able to make sure I can make my principal happy and make our school always look happy, right? So again, this is just something we use to monitor grades, give an example. Again, educate our athletes on the 4x4 for college recruitment. Understanding how the grading periods every 6 weeks ends, when it starts, what's the tutoring schedule look like on your campus, The testing schedule is really big, right? Understanding where your testing schedule lies, when you got to peel back. When, like, for example, I made sure to do it on the 20th. Our last day of star testing's tomorrow. So I made sure to start spring ball this week so I don't have to deal with that stuff moving forward. And then obviously give some sort of philosophy as far as your strength and conditioning. Sorry, that's loud. And then give ideas what your phases look like, what your workout cards look like. This is something I take a lot of pride in. Obviously we know how hard it is to coach the power clean. Everywhere I go, I emphasize it and I emphasize the technique. So obviously you see a lot of these kids power clean 225 or more, everywhere that I've gone, whether it's been PSA Memorial, San Benito, or here at Wesco East. So the coaching standard and the expectation does not change. And this is more of the football side of things. So our kind of slogan is sharpen the claw, earn the hunt. So that's something again that I stole from my previous employer at San Benito. So it's a famous quote, Abraham Lincoln. You give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'm going to spend the first four sharpening the axe. Right. Same thing that I tell our athletes, right? Sharpen the claw. We're Wildcats in the off season. We got to be able to earn the right, earn the hunt to compete at a high level in the fall. This is kind of just, a run through of my base offense, defense, special teams. This is something that I do follow as far as our macro cycle. So this is a 52-week cycle that lines up not only my football, but also my strength conditioning. And also at the very top, if you look, like, it's kind of, you see these colors at the top. I have a color code. So I know when the first day of school is, the last day of school, star testing, Telpus, benchmark, map testing, Christmas break, summer break, like everything is here. So when I'm planning things for strength conditioning, I know, okay, I'm going GPP, I know I'm going general strength, max strength, strength power, power speed, strength power in the in season, and then power speed. Hopefully, if we're in the postseason. So that's kind of the way I kind of break up my 52-week plan. Give examples of what your install looks like. Outside zone counter. What it looks like. So the committee has an idea. This is our week three or our 3 week install for our spring ball offensively. Practice script example, depth chart. A drill menu for every single position. This is something what a scouting report. This is something my coaches are currently working on right now. A scouting report. For the offseason, who we're playing, who they got coming back, how they lined up to our base formations. This is something that I give to our middle school coaches. So this is again a vertical program alignment. So if you're looking at this, hopefully you can see this and not kind of zoom in. But this top tier, you're reading it from left to right. It says offensive line, right? And it's broken up from varsity, JV, freshman, eighth grade, seventh grade, right? So I tell my middle school staff, hey, when these seventh graders are done, the offensive linemen, they got to be able to get in a proper 2 point, 3 point stance. They got to be able to identify defensive lineman alignments, identify all the gaps, fronts, and they got to be able to know what a base block is. Then you move on to eighth grade. It's all of that. Plus, they got to know a reach block, a down block, and they got to understand a boot pass game. And then you go to freshmen. It's all of that. Plus, now they got to know quick game, JV, sprint out, pull to kick out, varsity, pull to kick out, and then combos to linebackers, right? And I have that for every single position. So that way the middle school coaches know exactly what the expectation is. This just involves more of athletic development. This is just more of a scoping sequence that I make the coaches do a month before spring ball. So, like, for example, this is a calendar breakdown from March 23rd to April 17th. And these are the things and drills that our coaches are going to be doing to, whatever drills that they're doing, it has to be able to coincide with whatever your scheme is, right? So whatever I did on March 23rd, I shouldn't be doing on March 17th. There should be different drills that we're doing. And so this is just a simple way for your coaches to keep track of the drills that they're doing. This is just a scope and sequence for our middle school. This is just more examples of things that we got going on. So one thing that I made sure to point out in my interview was to make sure, like, I know a lot of people were going to use my youth against me, right? So one thing was going to be the question was like, man, this guy's only been coaching for 7 years, right? So how are we going to hire a head coach, to run a 5A program? He's only been coaching 7 years, and I made sure to bring up all these coaches, whether it was the NFL, whether it was the collegiate level, or even here down in the Rio Grande Valley. These are all great coaches. They're winning coaches. They all got hired at a very young age. You know what I'm saying? And these are things that I wanted to be able to get the audience or the committee to understand. And then these are just reasons, this is your last, basically statement, your closing statements on why you should be, a head coach, and then ultimately this was my last slide. Winning's important, but remember, it's about building leaders from our community, so this is what I'm about. Yeah. Winning championships, gold footballs, all that stuff's important. But if we're not getting our kids to cross the stage, and with their neck looking like that because they're honor graduates and they're this and they're that, then we're failing as coaches. So we want to give our kids a chance, with life after they graduate. high school. And then that is the last slide, man. So so I know I kind of rushed through that. Hopefully that's kind of what you guys. I hope I stayed on point as far as my topic, but that's what I got. If you guys have any questions, I mean, feel free to go ahead and fire away.
Hey, Coach, excellent job. Really covering everything and getting all that information in about 40 minutes. So um, I'll go ahead and start the questioning off. This one really, I think it's a good question, especially for not only coaches who are breaking into their first head job, but also coaches right now in general. But how are you yourself adapting to the staffing issues you're seeing statewide with districts, facing financial issues and things of that nature? Like, how are you going to handle that yourself?
Yeah, so that's probably like I said, that's been the hugest headache for me because obviously I have guys that are ready to go. I have guys that I want to bring in, right? And like I said, it's very important that you bring in people that are like-minded, especially at the top, right? Your coordinators. And ultimately, it's just one of those things, man, where, like to me, you don't ever want to make excuses, right? So I always, don't like to, say those things. But just being able to manage the people that you already have, right? Have a plan for them. If you know that this coach is very weak at this, then don't delegate them that. You know what I mean? Have a sit down with them, try to get them, like I know right now, that we have some coaches that have issues as far as, the scheme, not the scheme, but just coaching a new position, right? And so I've sat down with them, I've told them, coach, this is what you're going to do in Indy. This is how you're going to coach it, X, Y, Z, all the way down. You know what I mean? And just being able to work with people because at the end of the day, if you can't get people in, man, those are the people you're stuck with. So you don't want to mistreat them. You don't want to, belittle them because, if they got to stay on your staff, now you're looking behind your back every 2 seconds because you're like, damn, I treat this guy like crap. And now, he's on my staff. You know what I mean? And I can't get rid of him because if I get rid of him, that's one less coach I have. That's one less set of eyes I have, supervision, all those things, man. So that's kind of the way that I've been dealing with it, just taking it one day at a time, being in communication with your AD and just constantly, being honestly, I'm annoying. Like, I'm telling my AD, hey man, like I need help. Hey, can we get this guy in? Can we do this? Can we do that? And it's always a no, but slowly but surely, I think we're gonna be able to start working to people in.
Awesome, thanks, Coach.
Yes, sir.
Uh, anyone else? We got some time for some questions. If y'all have any questions for Coach Cuellar.
Coach Cuellar, great presentation, Coach. Thank you for being here today. Coach Cuellar, I love you, man. But what has been the biggest challenge you have faced in these 90 days that you've been the head coach, athletic coordinator?
Man, first off, hey, I love you, dog. So, shout out to you and everything that you do. But Coach Perez, the hardest thing, man, I think, besides, like I said, I think formulating the staff has been the hardest thing. So I don't want to give the same answer. So, I think the second hardest thing, is just being able to realize and accept that the most peaceful time of your day is the athletic period. So that's always been hard for me because being being a coordinator, being a position coach, it's always like, man, the most like hectic time of your day is like indie, going out doing football, weight room, whatever it is that you're doing in the period. And then after that, it's more like you go to class, you have conference, you have downtime. And I feel like, I hate being pulled out of class. I try to avoid it as much as possible because I want to be there with the kids. But that is by far the hardest thing to accept because as soon as I step off that field, I shower, I check my phone. I swear I got like 10 texts, two missed calls. This parent called. You got to come over here and do this. So that's probably been the hardest thing to being able to adjust to because again, like you think, hey man, I have all this time. I could, I want to break down film. I want to, look at this scheme. I want to get on my Glazier clinic and look at this and watch this all day. And the truth is, man, you do not have that time. You don't. And so it becomes stressful and it can become annoying at times. But I think that's been the hardest. The second hardest thing for me is accepting that I don't have that downtime, man. Not downtime as in to chill, but downtime as in, hey, man, I want to break down film. I want to scheme. I want to do this. So that's why it's important that you bring in coordinators that you trust and that you believe in.
Awesome, Coach. Anyone else got any questions for Coach Cuellar?
Hey, Coach. This is Coach Castillo. How are you doing? Great presentation.
Thank you.
I'm always now the. I remember when I was like you, the youngest guy in the room, and now I'm the oldest guy. And I've had this isn't about me, but this is a question that, or maybe something that you addressed that it took me. I've had 4 head coaching jobs, and I think one of the things that when you go in for an interview, and you might have, I know you had to go fast, but the buy-in by the seniors is always the toughest thing. They may have really, loved their previous head coach or
Hmm.
kind of bought into where they were playing. And now you're making, hey, you're going to be an outside backer instead of an inside backer, those kind of things. And for me, one of the things I do is, and I want to know, maybe I want to know what you do maybe for that,
Hmm.
like we have like a senior lunch, where I meet with the seniors uh, almost the whole year, you know what I mean? The whole
Hmm.
season where they're just coming in and of course they all got different lunches, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I gotta be careful that I don't eat all 3 times. You know what I'm saying? What do you do to invest in those guys because they're the ones, without any senior leadership, you can struggle because they can take everybody with them the wrong way. What do you think you do for that? I'm just looking for some advice.
Yeah. So honestly, that's a very good question, Coach. And I think one thing that definitely helped me was I was here the year before. So I got here last year around this time. So again, obviously a lot of those kids were juniors, right? So I was the strength conditioning coordinator. So I was with those guys every day in the sun. We're running, it's cold, we're running or we're outside with them. So I think those guys kind of bought into, like, okay, this guy's, he's here for us, in other words, right? Because he's always in here with us, he's always grinding. I was always taking the lead as far as keeping the weight room open after school, summer strength conditioning workouts. So I think that helped me. But I know one thing, like I said, that kind of that we've been doing is maybe something similar. Like for example, we've been starting our leadership council, right? And again, that as of right now, it's been primarily of seniors. And I've done that on purpose because, like you said, like, you kind of hit the nail on the head. One thing I know my previous mentor always preached was the seniors will take us as far as we want to go, right? So if you have a very strong senior group and they're able to lead and police the team, hey man, you're more than likely going to be able to make some noise, hopefully, right? Versus, if you have a very weak senior group, they're not very vocal, they do what they want, they get away what they want, then obviously you're going to have a hard time with your football team. But um, I know as of right now, that's kind of what we do. So what I do is typically like if we're starting at 7:15, I'll bring our seniors in or our leadership council like at 6:45 and basically I'll just sit down with those guys, talk to them, kind of see what the climate is in the locker room, kind of see what the direction is of what the team, and obviously get their feedback. Like, what do you guys feel? What do you think we got to get better at? What are things? And obviously you let them kind of. If they feel like, coach, I think we need to run more, man. Like we're not in shape. Like, okay, so we're gonna run more. You know what I'm saying? Or hey, coach, we got to spend more time in the weight room. All right, well, we're gonna spend more time in the weight room. Kind of give them a little dosage of what they want, and obviously still while it still sticks to kind of what your beliefs and your philosophy is. But yeah, ultimately I think I got lucky, man, because again I was already here. I had a huge presence with the kids, and I think when I kind of came in, the kids already kind of respected me. So I don't want to sit here and lie to you and say I had a hard time winning these kids over because I didn't. But I could kind of see where if you're going in somewhere new and kind of you said, especially if you're applying for a place and they have a ton of tradition, that coach left somewhere, and let's say he left and he didn't get fired or something, then it could be very hard, to win those seniors over. So that's definitely something that I'll keep in mind as far as those senior lunches, or just being able to highlight those kids.
Thanks, Coach. I wish I was as smart and knowledgeable as you young coaches are now. It's still alive and a great profession, and I'm just like you. I was a head coach at my alma mater for 11 years, so that buy-in when you could
Nice.
say, I was you. I walked through these halls, and that was my locker, and this and that, and I was able to do that for my
Yeah.
second head job. But I'm always curious what people do to with the seniors because I went to Centennial High School in Frisco, and
Okay.
I I had all this. This year I had all this anxiety about that because I got hired late.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Coach, the seniors were the best group I've ever been around. Just
Wow.
just took, the head coach previous to me had done a great job in culture, and he had just retired. He didn't get
Okay.
fired. So, it was a really, really special year, and picked to last in the district and picked to win no games. And we won four, should have won five, but those guys were fighting every week and playing for me and the other coaches. But I was just curious, maybe if you had any ideas. I forgot that you had said you were there and played there. So again, good luck to you, Coach. And we're lucky to have you speak today, and we can see why they wanted to hire you just with your organizational skills. You
Thank you.
know,
I appreciate that.
Coaches, anyone else have any questions for Coach Cuellar tonight?
Hey, I got a question. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
This is Coach Velasquez. I'm on the Hispanic Zoom account.
Yes, sir.
Hey, Coach. And sorry, I'm not the camera's on. I'm driving right now. But my question is, you, trying to see if I can get it out. So you were on staff, obviously the year before. What was kind of your approach preparing to apply for the job, and of course, like the interviewing? Like, what was your approach to like what you wanted presented, like as far as your mindset, like as far as changes or keeping things the same, kind of what was going on already in your program
Yeah.
or in
So
the program?
Yeah, so obviously being from here, that's number one. Like I'm familiar with what type of kids we get. And then coaching here now, I was able to kind of see things that we lacked, and things that could be better. East, I'm not sure how familiar you guys are with the Valley or with West Squeeze, but they had a very good tradition. Coach Burgett did a very good job here. He was ended up finishing the winningest head coach in WISD history. So I think he had about 90 wins, if I'm not mistaken. So he won a lot of games, won a lot of championships, won a lot of gold balls. So the tradition and that kind of stuff was there. But there's still areas that could definitely be improved. And I just think when I went in the interview, I didn't want to go in there pretending to be somebody that I wasn't, and I wanted to make sure that when I went in there, I was gonna make it very clear that there was gonna be some major changes as far as, from the scheme to the structure to what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. And just making sure that, at the end of the day, hey, we're still gonna make sure that we're still finding a way to be successful, or at least giving ourselves a chance to be successful. But as far as like leading up to it, this was something that I always wanted, and there was other people that were applying for it, and it was a little intimidating because I mean there were people that were previous head coaches, or they had a lot of experience in the game and that kind of stuff. But I just wanted to go in there, and to me, I think I was under a great mentor over at San Benito with Dan Gomez. And just the way he runs things, man, is first class. Everything's first class. He holds everybody to a standard, to an expectation, and he's able to get the most out of you, man. Like he's really able to get the most out of you, and that's kind of the work ethic and the drive that he has definitely inspired me as an assistant coach, and then I would ultimately be a coordinator there before I left. But yeah, just being able to see the areas that I knew. I mean, I kind of had a head start because I knew where the weaknesses were in the program. I saw what we lacked and what could be better, and so going into the interview, those were things that I wanted to address because again, that goes back to, right, like I said, do your research, understand what this program lacks, how you can make it better, what you can do. Um, and that was kind of my approach, and just, still wanting to have the mentality that, hey, we're still going to be rugged, we're still going to be very gritty, and we want to be able to hang our hat on discipline and accountability.
Thanks, Coach. Appreciate you, man.
Yes, sir, no problem.
Coach, you still good for questions?
Yeah, I'm still good, man. If anyone has one more, a couple more, I'm still here.
Coaches, anyone else got a question for Coach Cuellar? Awesome job on the presentation, but also answering everyone's questions at the same time. I'll ask one more, coaches, so we don't make that wait.
All right, go for
Wait for nothing. How is it for a guy going back home and coaching at his alma mater? What does that mean to you, and what does that kind of meant as like the next step in your career?
Obviously, I mean, to me, man, it's still kind of surreal. Like, showing up where, you went to high school and, you experienced a lot of things, and being able to come here and just be able to use all your experiences, man, use all your experiences and being able to pour back into the same community that you grew up in, the same kids, and realizing, hey, man, like I was once that kid, and I want to be able to give our kids everything that I've been able to experience and learn and things that I've been able to do. So, it's very wholesome. It's very humbling as well. There's definitely pressure. There's definitely pressure because you're from here and you don't want to let your own hometown down, right? You represent your hometown and everything that they represent, and you want to make sure that, hey, man, I was a product from here, and this is what we produce here, and we want to be able to produce not just a winning head coach, but an athletic coordinator that is able to develop a whole athletic program that's able to be proud and put out a product for our community that they can be proud of. So, very humbling, very, very wholesome, but also definitely pressure. Pressure is definitely there. And you want to be able to make people, proud. And ultimately, you want to be able to make sure that every day you come to work, man, that you come to work and you don't take it for granted, because I think that's where a lot of people slip up, man. They take this job for granted, and ultimately you can't control everything, right? Like I heard coach say, one of the coaches, I don't know if it was you, Coach Castillo, but you have a coach right now busting his butt. They just don't have the Jimmys and the Joes, right? So you got to continue to just chip away and do what you can. But you want to make sure that you're always competitive no matter what. And I ultimately firmly believe that if you're competitive, it's because you have a legit program. Because even the years that you don't have studs or dudes or guys, but yet you're still competing in the top four, I mean, that says a lot about what you're doing there to develop your kids.
Awesome. Thanks, Coach.
No problem.
Anyone else? Last chance to ask one more question for Coach Cuellar. No. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap this up. This is Coach Carlos Cuellar, the new AD at Westaco East. And we'd like to thank our sponsor, Go Route, for sponsoring our second Hispanic Coaches Association Zoom clinic tonight. Coach Cuellar talked about his first 90 days of starting up the program and issues that you have to overcome as you build your own program and put the identity together. Coach Cuellar, I'd like to thank you tonight. Awesome job tonight, going over many topics with your slideshow and answering the questions by the coaches tonight. Thank you, Coach.
Yes,
And
sir.
good luck
Thank
on
you,
your
guys.
season.
Y'all have a safe rest of the year, and y'all have a great season. Thank you for having me.
Congrats, Coach.